You ever have that one neighbor who thinks the whole world revolves around them? Well, let me tell you about the day my front yard became the center of a full-blown HOA drama. I live in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, just folks trying to enjoy their homes and mind their business. But of course, there's always that *1 person. In this case, it's Karen from the HOA, the kind of person who thinks every sidewalk is her runway and every yard is her shortcut. For months, she's been cutting through my property like it's a public road, waving at me like she's doing me a favor. I tried to be nice. I even put up signs and politely mentioned it, but she wasn't having any of it. Then one day, I finally put up a simple little fence to mark the edge of my yard. Nothing wild, just enough to make it clear that, hey, this isn't a community highway. That's when things got weird. Karen showed up fuming, phone in hand, yelling something about emergency access and HOA rights. And then, without a second thought, she actually called 911, over my fence over my yard . But here's the kicker. What she didn't expect was who showed up and what they said to her next. So there I was, standing in my driveway, watching Karen furiously tapping on her phone, pacing like she was directing traffic at an airport. She was shouting things like, "This is a safety hazard, and you can't just block access like that." Mind you, this wasn't some massive barricade. I put up a low garden fence, just enough to mark my own property line. It wasn't on her land, it didn't block any actual road, and no, it definitely wasn't violating any HOA rules. I had even double-checked the bylaws just to be safe. But Karen? Oh no. She had convinced herself that she had some kind of HOA superhero badge, and that my yard was part of her personal shortcut to the other side of the street. I later found out she'd been cutting through my property for years before I even moved in, just walking straight across it like it was a public trail. Some of the older neighbors said she'd even told new residents that it was an approved walking path, which obviously it's not. And the real kicker, she actually told the 911 operator I was blocking emergency access, whatever that means. So now I'm standing there, waiting to see who the police are going to believe, her wild story or the actual facts. And then the patrol car pulls up. The patrol car rolls up slow, like the officer already senses something ridiculous is waiting. Karen runs up before he even parks, flailing her arms and pointing at my fence like it's a crime scene. She's going off about how I'm endangering the community, saying ambulances can't get through, kids can't walk safely, and how the HOA never approved my changes. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there with my coffee, trying not to laugh, but also kind of nervous. I mean, no one wants the cops at their house over something this stupid. The officer finally gets out and calmly asks what's going on. Karen launches into this dramatic monologue, like she's in court or something. She even pulls out some crumpled HOA newsletter from last year, trying to prove her point. I explain my side, how it's private property, how I installed the fence legally, and how there's literally a public sidewalk 10 feet away that she just refuses to use. And then one of my neighbors walks over. Quiet guy, lives across the street, always kept to himself. But today, he speaks up. He tells the officer he's seen Karen trespassing almost daily, even walking her dog across my lawn like it's a park. Turns out, I'm not the only one she's rubbed the wrong way. But just as things start to shift in my favor, another HOA board member shows up. The moment the HOA board member appeared, the whole scene got even more intense. She strode up with a clipboard and a look like she was ready to settle some scores. Karen immediately turned on the charm, acting like she was the victim of some great injustice. The board member nodded along, then started pulling out a stack of papers, rules, meeting minutes, notices, trying to back up Karen's claims. It felt like they came prepared to turn this little fence dispute into a full-on neighborhood showdown. The officer stood there, reading through the papers, glancing between us, clearly trying to figure out if this was a legit emergency or just a petty feud blowing up. Meanwhile, Karen was getting louder, insisting that blocking community access was dangerous and that I was selfish for putting my needs above everyone else's. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was boiling. This wasn't about safety, it was about control. Karen wanted to keep using my yard like it was her personal shortcut, and now the HOA was backing her up. The officer stood there, reading through the papers, glancing between us, clearly trying to figure out if this was a legit emergency or just a petty feud blowing up. Meanwhile, Karen was getting louder, insisting that blocking community access was dangerous and that I was selfish for putting my needs above everyone else's. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was boiling. This wasn't about safety, it was about control. Karen wanted to keep using my yard like it was her personal shortcut, and now the HOA was backing her up. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more tense, the officer asked if there had ever been any real emergency needing that yard as a road. Karen hesitated, then admitted she'd never seen an ambulance or fire truck come through there. That's when the quiet neighbor spoke up again, saying he'd never witnessed any emergency vehicles needing that path either. The officer looked at all of us, then back at the papers, and that's when things took a surprising turn. Just as the tension seemed to start easing, the officer's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down, then his face shifted from calm to serious. Without a word, he stepped aside to take the call. We all waited, the awkward silence thick between us. When he returned, his expression was unreadable, but there was a new edge in his voice. He told us there had been a complaint lodged, not just about the fence, but about the entire way that HOA had been handling property disputes in the neighborhood. Apparently, someone had taken the time to gather evidence and bring it up to higher authorities. Karen's confident smile faltered. The board member's clipboard slipped a little as she looked around nervously. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about one fence anymore. It was about years of neighbors feeling pushed around by the HOA's strict rules and Karen's own over-the-top behavior. The officer explained this complaint could trigger an investigation that might impact the HOA's power over residents, including decisions about property access and yard use. That's when Karen's phone rang loudly in her purse. She snatched it up, and for the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. The officer gave a small nod, then said he needed to speak with both of us separately before leaving. As Karen and the board member retreated to a corner to whisper urgently, I realized this was way bigger than just a yard fence. The quiet neighbor leaned in and muttered, "You're not alone in this. It's been brewing for a while." And just like that, what started as a petty dispute exploded into something nobody saw coming. The real question now was, what happens when the whole neighborhood's secrets come out? After the officer talked to us separately, things moved faster than I expected. He told Karen and the HOA board member that, according to property records and neighborhood bylaws, my yard was indeed private property, and the fence wasn't breaking any rules. More importantly, the complaint about the HOA's overreach wasn't just hearsay. It was serious enough to warrant a formal review by the local government. Karen's confident attitude started to crack. The officer made it clear that repeatedly trespassing on private property wasn't something the HOA could overlook, especially if it was causing distress among neighbors. He warned that if she kept pushing this, it could lead to fines, or worse, legal action. For a moment, I thought the whole thing was finally over. The tension in the air seemed to lift, and I even caught a glimpse of Karen biting her lip, clearly frustrated but quiet. But just as the officer turned to leave, Karen blurted out something nobody expected. "You don't know the half of it. This isn't just about a fence. There's something you're all missing, something buried in the HOA records." The officer paused, his curiosity piqued, and we all stared at her, waiting for the next bombshell. It seemed like the quiet neighborhood feud was about to open a door to secrets that could shake everything up even more. And that's when I realized this story was far from over. After Karen's cryptic comment, the officer calmly asked her to explain, but she only smirked and said she'd share that information at the next HOA meeting. It was clear she wanted to keep stirring the pot. The officer reminded everyone to stay civil and that any future disputes should go through the proper channels, not 911 calls of offenses. Then he left, leaving us standing there with a mix of relief and new questions. In the days that followed, I talked to several neighbors, and it became clear this wasn't just about my yard or Karen's shortcuts. The HOA had a history of clashing with residents over petty rules and power struggles. My fence was just the spark that ignited a deeper conversation about fairness, respect, and boundaries in our community. As for Karen, she cooled off for a while but kept showing up at meetings, still pushing her agenda. Meanwhile, I learned it's okay to stand up for your property, and that sometimes a simple fence can mean more than just marking land. It's about standing up to entitlement. This whole experience taught me that community isn't just about rules, but about respect and communication. And if you ever think your neighbor is being a bit *2* entitled, maybe don't wait until they call 911 on you.